Good afternoon, this is Jackie Tisdale. I'm the Public Information Officer for Ascension Public Schools. We are about to start the election information webinar, but we're having a couple little audio issues, so if you could just hold on for about 5 minutes and we will get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This is going to be about our school construction bond election, which is on August 15th. My name is Jackie Tisdale. I'm the Public Information Officer for Ascension Public Schools, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's webinar. So let's go over the format for the webinar. It's going to last 30 minutes, and that includes our presentation and our question and answer session. All microphones are muted except for our presenters. And if you would like to submit a question, use the question or chat module in GoToWebinar to type your question. At the end of the presentation, I will ask those questions to our presenters. You'll have a chance to provide some feedback. We have a survey that'll pop up after the webinar, and this is being recorded and will be posted on our bond election website, apsb.org/2020bond. Our panelists today are Superintendent David Alexander, Assistant Superintendent A. Denise Graves, our Chief Instructional Director Edith Walker, our Chief Operational Director Chad Lynch, and our Supervisor of Planning and Construction Jeff Parra. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Alexander.
Well, thank you, and we are grateful that you joined us today. You know, we have been busy this summer and some times of uncertainty, but one thing is for certain, that we continue to live in a thriving community in Ascension Parish, and that we know that we want to continue to work hard to service children here so that they have educational opportunities. And as such, we always like to start off everything that we do with our community and at events that we go to, and even when we talk with our internal folks here, reminding us always of our purpose. And so I'm going to kind of go, rather than going from our mission to our vision to our purpose, I'm going to go backwards with you here. You know, we come to work every day in Ascension Parish, whether we're educational service providers or operational service providers or administrative service providers, we know that every experience that a child encounters with us should be a very high quality experience, because they all contribute to that child's development. They all contribute to the success of a school day. And all of those experiences could become obstacles to the school day should we allow that to happen. So our purpose is to provide quality experiences to children every day at every touch point, so that we can say that we are developing children in Ascension Parish academically. We're providing them opportunities to develop skills around their talent and interest. And we're helping them develop, and we're modeling social, emotional learning and emotional maturity in how we interact with each other, how we coach them to interact with each other, how we help them encounter challenges and those difficulties in life that become obstacles to success, but when we overcome them, that makes success so much sweeter. So all of that contributes to overall our mission, and that is that we can better assure that all of the children in Ascension Parish one day are successful in an ever-changing world. So that is sort of our purpose, our vision, and our mission. Quality experiences so that they develop the things that they need to develop through a K-12 experience, so that they can be successful in an ever-changing world. Go to our next slide, Jackie. So we're here today to really talk to you about our continued effort to ensure that we have the high-quality facilities throughout our school system. As we mentioned before, we believe that a child's experience at every touch point matters. And that's the bus ride that they have, that is the experiences they have with technology, and certainly the experience they have in a building, interacting with a facility. And facilities are part of their educational process. And so Ascension has always had a strong commitment to that. We have always, we have state-of-the-art facilities throughout our school district, and we want to continue to keep that. And those facilities that we have throughout our school district are a direct credit to our community, because we have been using 15.08 mills for some time now to pay off debt that we incur through construction on major capital improvement projects, whether it's building new schools or renovating an existing school or what we call flipping an existing school. That debt that we incur continues to be the result of the generosity of our community that contribute annually 15.08 mills so that we can pay off bond debt that we incur. The most recent bond extension renewal that we did was in 2016. And the biggest pieces of that 2016 bond renewal were 4 new schools, 3 primaries and a middle. And Bullion Primary School opened last fall in 2019. We'll have Bluff Ridge Primary and Bluff Middle School that'll open this fall in 2020. And we have Sugar Mill Primary that's on schedule to open in the fall of 2021. And look, those are significant just in normal times, because we're bringing primary schools that some of them had 1,000 or more children in it back down to a number of 500 to 600, and middle schools that were getting up around 1,300 and 1,400 children back to 700 and 800. And that's significant. Even more significant in this day and age, where we really find the need to minimize, crowds and minimize overcrowded schools. And so it's been a very big help to that. And I just want to applaud here publicly the efforts that Ms. Graves led back in 2016, when she led our community in the school system in the 2016 bond extension renewal. And Denise, thank you for that time.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander.
So we have delivered a number of those projects now. We're not done with that list just yet. Remember, Sugar Mill doesn't open till 2021, but we have accomplished those promises that we made back in 2016 for the most part, and the ones that haven't yet been delivered are on schedule to be delivered here in short order. So why do we continue to need these projects? Well, I mean, this graph is indicative of what is pretty easy to see, that Ascension has had an average growth of 375 students a year. That's 3,751 students over the course of the last 9 years. That is significant growth. It continues to demand additional staffing, and obviously, I mean, we all know it continues to demand more space for children to learn, so we need new facilities. And quite honestly, I'll take us all the way back to former superintendents, Robert Kluot, Donald Sanji, Patrice Peugeot, all recognized that need as, you know, we begun to realize, you know, back in the 90s even, that wow, this community in Ascension Parish is really going to experience some significant growth over the course of the next 15 to 20 years. And sure enough, that anticipation has happened, because you can see what has happened just locally with rooftops. And of course, when rooftops come, schools need to be built as well. The next graphic is, you know, targets just high school. So remember the previous slide basically said that we have an average of 375 students new every year over the last 10 years. Well, this is just in high school. This is how our high schools have grown since 2009. You know, Dutchtown High School opened in the early 2000s. I had the privilege of serving there as an administrator, an assistant principal, and a principal for a number of years. And I watched that school personally, experienced that school growing from around 900 students to around 16 to 1,700 when I left. And now it's well over 2,000, probably 2,300 students or so is what we'd be expecting this year. But similarly, Dutchtown was built to relieve Santa Maria and East Ascension on the east side as we saw them getting large. I actually also had the privilege to be a math teacher and a football coach at Santa Maria High School back in the very late 90s. And we had over 2,000 students on our campus. And so that was when it was realized that we do need a new high school. And so Dutchtown was open, and that relieved the high school pressure for a long time. But you can see now, since 2009, we've increased 1,566 students in high school. That in and of itself is a high school. So we know it's time that we invest now in really making strides towards getting a new high school open on our east side to relieve the crowding that exists at Dutchtown, EA, and Santa Maria. This is just a little picture of the new developments throughout our parish. If you'll notice, lots or approved developments and new lots exist throughout our parish in all 4 feeder systems right now: Donaldsonville, Dutchtown, East Ascension, and Santa Maria. But if you'll notice the number of lots that have actually been approved, and if you'll note that really triggers for us some data, and of course it's predictive data. It's not a perfect crystal ball, but it indicates for us that this is the kind of growth that we're going to be seeing in the years ahead due to the number of rooftops that will come on these approved developments. And we're anticipating that there'll be another 2,500 students in primary school, 1,200 students in middle school, and another 826 students in high school as these lots, the unimproved property becomes improved property and has a new house sitting on it. Next slide. So we want to play this video for you, and then we'll close out with some final comments and give you an opportunity to ask some questions.
At Ascension Public Schools, our students are surpassing expectations in the classroom, in competitive arenas, and in demanding careers and fields of higher education. At Ascension Public Schools, we know that every student is important, every day is precious, and every opportunity should be seized because
the future is now.
That's why we're investing in 21st century learning environments that can nurture, protect, and propel our students forward. We currently have 31 campuses, including 4 high schools that are cultivating our leaders for tomorrow. More than 23,000 students rely on Ascension Public Schools to prepare them to pursue their passions, and that number continues to grow. That's why Ascension Public Schools is proposing a $140 million capital improvement plan to construct new facilities and make needed improvements across the district. Voters are being asked to extend an existing 15.08 mills to fund the projects. The election for the bond extension is August 15th. Early voting is July 25th to August 8th. The proposal is not a new tax, and it will not increase millage rates. This is a dedicated funding source that has been in effect for 40 years. More than half the district's schools have been constructed with this dedicated millage, as well as improvements made at every campus, all without increasing the rate, because our community continues to support and invest in its public schools. The current proposal includes plans to build a new high school in Prairieville. This much-needed campus will alleviate overcrowding at the other 3 high schools on the East Bank, allowing the district to maintain optimal student-to-teacher ratios at all campuses, while offering advanced technology and STEM learning that our students need to compete in today's world. The plan also includes updating existing campus facilities to put them on par with new construction, like East Ascension High School, where a complete makeover will give students greater access to 21st century resources, better facilities, and safer, more attractive learning spaces and common areas. Stanimal Primary and Middle will receive classroom improvements. Gonzales Middle School will receive renovations. Dutchtown Middle will receive classroom improvements, and a rear access road will be constructed for Dutchtown High School to ease traffic. Donaldsonville High will see upgrades, including expanding its commons area, while Laurie Middle will get improvements to its library. And all the high schools, including the new one to be built in Prairieville, will receive state-of-the-art turf fields for their stadiums. These investments will make the facilities better weatherproof and more accessible to other programs, including middle school football programs, soccer, marching bands, and ROTC. Community support continues to be the foundation for Ascension Public Schools' success. These proposed investments will perpetuate our collective commitment to provide every child a high-quality education to succeed in this ever-changing world. At Ascension Public Schools, we know the future is now. Each new skill learned is a seed planted. Each individual success is a collective step forward. Each investment is a promise for tomorrow.
The future is now.
So first of all, I want to tell you that the video is posted on our website. And so it streams awkwardly a little bit during this webinar. We apologize for that. But it's a great video, and it certainly is representative of some of the great things that go on in your community school system in Ascension Parish. And, you know, the comment of the young student in the very end and through all those students as they commented throughout the video, you know, I can remember as even a principal back at Dutchtown High School, I was asked the question as we started getting bigger and bigger, when are they going to build another high school? And I honestly couldn't answer that. And then I knew that we were beginning to acquire property where a new high school could go, and that was at the corner of Parker Road and 929, where we built Prairieville Primary School. But we knew that there was enough property there that one day there could be a high school there. And then when I became the director of high schools in 2011 through 2015 or 16, that question has been asked a time or two. When are we going to build a new high school? And I knew it would be somewhere in our future, but I didn't know exactly when. And then finally, when I had the privilege of taking this position as superintendent, as we began to push through these projects that were approved by our community for $120 million back in 2016, the question was, when are we going to build a high school? And I knew it would be in our future, but I didn't have the answer to that question because it had not yet been funded. But I knew in the 2016 bond, we did fund at least some preliminary things that would go on a site to prepare it for one day being a high school. And so the future is now. The numbers of high school students, as you saw in the graphics today, are indicative of where it's time where we need to build another high school. We have over 6,000 high school students on the east side. And so it is time for us to consider a fourth high school. We can do this without increasing the amount of millage that we collect from all of those that pay property taxes throughout our parish. That's residents and businesses and industry. We can continue to use the 1508 that we currently collect to go sell additional bonds that become debt for us, but those bonds that we sell up to 140 million can help us build a high school and help us accomplish many other things that are still on the list for major capital improvement projects. Those items are on your list right now. The new high school is, well over 50% of the amount of funding that we're asking to go after, but we're also wanting to do a major makeover at East Ascension. And what we're really talking about is flipping East Ascension High School, similar to what we did at Gonzales Primary, similar to what we did at Prairieville Middle School, where we actually do some demolition, not just take existing buildings and renovate. We need to do some major renovations at Gonzales Middle School. There won't be a lot of demolition there, but certainly doing some renovations there. And then you can see the rest of the list there. And also upgrading our athletic fields to have artificial turf on it, like our surrounding schools districts do in Livingston and in St. Charles and in several other places around in South Louisiana, giving access to those fields to our community, even in inclement weather. Now, you don't have to protect them as much. They don't become muddy. Little League teams can use those fields. Band and ROTC and a lot of the extracurricular activity that have to be careful to not use the field in certain conditions and stomp down the natural turf could have more access there. So we believe this is a good list. Quite honestly, it's not the final list. It's not, there'll always be capital improvements in a parish, in a school system that continues to have growth in it. And that's really a good thing. When we stop needing to make capital improvements, it's because our community is not growing anymore. So, and we're excited about investing $140 million back into this community, that for all of those that are in construction and in this area. So there's a lot of good things and win-wins that come out of this. And remember, this request does not increase the amount of millage that our residents, businesses, and industry pay in Ascension Parish. It is the same 15.08 that we are currently paying, that we would continue to pay to resolve this next round of debt. So with that, I will ask Ms. Tisdale if she would turn us to questions. I think that's our next moment.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to remind our viewers that if you would like to submit a question, that you need to type your question into the question chat module and go to webinar, and then I will ask those questions to our panelists. Our first question is, when will the new high school be open?
Okay, yes, that's a great question. And because of what we were able to do here with the 2016 bond extension, we were able to do some site preparations. A new high school, and Chad and Jeff were both here too, and they can correct me where I'm wrong, but generally speaking, from if you had to do property acquisition and then site preparation and everything else, that's a 4 to 5 year project. But with some of that already being done, we're looking now at around a 3-year project. So should we get approval to go get this money, then we're anticipating that the new high school would open in the fall of 2023. Chad, Jeff, anything to add to that?
No, that is the goal. We do about 12 months to finish up design, and then 24 months of construction is generally the timeline. So we think we could do it by 2023. That's the best case scenario.
So we would need approval to move to the next step. We, just like back in 2016, we really couldn't do anything on the property until we got approval in 2016 to actually start beginning site preparations. The next step for this project would be design. and before we can actually go and move forward with an architect would require approval of this effort.
I have a follow-up question about the high school. What will the name and mascot be for the new high school?
Well, that's always a big question that we all have, right? So the naming of schools is done by our board, and a mascot is chosen by a principal and the community in that school. So those are steps that would be ahead of us. So to point, the school does not have a name, nor does it have a mascot, but those would be all a part of the 3-year process as we move forward.
Our next question is, I do not see my school on the election project list. So what impact will this bond election have on my school?
Okay, so I will let, because I think our experts in the room here can kind of talk you through how we develop lists. And we've had a list back in 2009. We've had a list in 2016. We have a list now that we're asking here in 2020. And remember, I've already referenced that this list is not all of the things that we have. So I'm going to let Chad and Jeff speak to that.
So this list represents what the current needs are. There may be needs at other schools as well. In fact, there are. The list that this was derived from, the projects in the $140 million list, it came from a list that was much bigger. And, you know, basically we ended up at 140 because that's what the 15.08 can generate for us right now without an increase. So there are other needs. Some of the other needs, if there's any immediate maintenance needs at a school, they're being planned to be dealt with through the maintenance budget. But in terms of like new development, new work at a school, we try to put the capital improvements projects in here. So without knowing what school you're referring to, I couldn't speak specifically to those needs. For instance, if your school happened to be one of the ones that was relieved by a new school this year, then that, you know, in the previous bond, that's an example of how a project could help another school. But in this bond, since all we have is the high school, if your school was one of the existing high schools, then the first project would help you in that it would reduce enrollment at your school. So it's really hard to answer without knowing the specific school. But I would tell you that this list is the top highest needs as seen by our board members who got feedback from community and principals.
So Chad, talk us through just a little bit, if you would. So we bring a much larger list through the strategic planning process, and then so there are some discussions around where we create priorities. And so,
right. So over the years we've had, this is about the 5th bond cycle I've been involved with, and over 5 cycles, numerous, every school's been touched, but you don't touch every school each cycle. And like Mr. Alexander said, the process is such that we bring a list of needs that's developed by our maintenance staff, our principals, bring it into a strategic planning meeting, and we vet those projects. We give them a title, a scope of work, and an estimated number cost. The board members help us to bring community feedback into that meeting because they hear from their communities. And then after numerous strategic planning meetings, we arrive at, you know, which are the ones that are the hottest for us right now. And that's kind of how they made this list. So I don't know if that helps you.
Excellent. We have
next question.
Yeah, several questions that are coming in. The next one is, who is the engineer and architect? It doesn't ask about specific school, but I'm assuming that they're talking about the high school because that's when the question came through when we were talking about high school.
Yeah.
So who is the
engineers and architects typically are not selected until after the bond passes. Like, you don't know that you have these projects until a bond election is voted favorably for by the taxpayers. So we usually wait. Now on the high school, because we have a lot of need for that school and a lot of pressure, we recently advertised for the selection of the architect on that, although we wouldn't actually hire them unless this passes. We wouldn't actually proceed with that work. But so no architects have been selected for these projects at this point in time. The only one that's in the works is the architect for the high school right now.
Thank you. And our next question is, how much did it cost to build Dutchtown High, and what will be the difference in terms of cost between the new school compared to Dutchtown High?
I guess that's making me feel old because I was around when we built Dutchtown High School. I think many of us in the room, or a couple of us, Ms. Graves is here as well. We did some work to tally up the cost of Dutchtown High. The main school building itself was $22.5 million. But when you add together into that the athletic facilities that we built and the books and furniture and all the things we bought to open the school, the tally that we came up with back when I did it was $30 million. We spent about $30 million on Dutchtown High. And then this particular project being built 18 years later, due to just normal escalation of construction costs, I want to say, Jeff, the construction cost in that 79 million is what I believe it was 67 million.
67 or 68 million.
Right, and the rest of those costs go towards paying the architect, paying for surveys, paying for books and furniture, and all the things that go into putting the school together. So the significant cost increases in the construction cost, but we're basically building a school similar in program to what you see at Dutchtown High School, but we're doing it 18 years later. So the cost went over 18 years from 30 million to 80 million, basically, to 79,550.
Thank you. Next question is, Prairieville Primary does not currently have a gym, so when there is inclement weather, the students don't really have a place for gym class. Are there plans to add a gym in the future at Prairieville Primary?
The primary schools, we have, I think, 18 now. What we recently did was build a covered play pavilion, so there would be outdoor covered play. And we built a covered play pavilion at all primaries, and the new primaries that are under construction have a covered play pavilion. It is essentially almost like a gym with no sidewalls. Sidewalls could be added at a later date. It's a metal building structure with a metal roof on it, concrete slab built, with a building foundation. So it could be closed in at some point. Right now, there are no plans to do so. The fund that we had in the 2016 bond built the outdoor, open-air covered play pavilions. And right now, we're not targeting gyms at primary schools. They exist at middle school and high school right now.
Yeah, if a gym happens to be on a campus of a primary school, it would be like a shared campus, like Santa Mo Primary, Dutchtown Primary, Gonzales Primary, where they've existed back in the past on these shared campuses, on these standalone primary campuses. I can't think of any of our standalone primary campuses that have a gym on it.
That weren't a high school, because they previously were a high school, and that's why the gym is there. Like Gonzales, the one
so it's not customary to build a gym in Ascension Parish on a primary school campus, and really that's not customary in many places, to be honest with you. I'm not saying it's not anywhere, but not any places, not many.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what impact will the new high school have on other school attendance boundary lines?
Well, that's a good question. And so obviously when you take on the east side of our, geographically on the east side of the Mississippi River right now, we have 3 feeder systems, Santa Mo, EA, and Dutchtown. So somehow we have divided our residential property into sections to where you have families that send their children to a primary school, then a middle school, and then a high school that's in what we call a feeder system. And so we would have to take the current structure where we take the east side of the Mississippi River and divide it sort of by 3. We'd now be dividing by 4. So you would expect that there would be some impacts to all 3 of the existing feeder systems as you resettle and populate the new high school and create a new feeder system. So right now, when you think about where the feeder systems exist, you have a cluster of primary schools that send children to a cluster of middle schools that send children to a single high school. We would have to reassign primary schools to be in a feeder system with this new high school, reassign middle schools to be in a feeder system with the new high school, so that we wouldn't be just creating a new high school attendance zone, we'd be actually creating a new feeder system attendance zone on the east side. And that process will take place sometime during this 3-year process. And, certainly we'd have to provide enough time in that to, before the school opens. So if the target date to open the school would be the fall of 2023, you would expect this sort of restructuring of attendance zones to be taking somewhere in the calendar year 21 or 22.
We usually wait a little bit longer because the growth that happens between now and then helps us to make final adjustments to boundaries. So if you do it too soon, then you may not account for growth, say a subdivision that gets approved after you do it. So we wait till, like you said, David, the last 12 months really, right before we open.
We have one last question. What happens if the bond does not pass?
Well, I think that's another excellent question. So if the bond does not pass, then we don't do any of the projects that you see listed there. It's really a capital improvement project. This money does not go into the general operating cost of our school system. None of this money is used for, general routine maintenance or buying instructional supplies or paying any salaries or anything of that nature. This is strictly dedicated to funding the projects that you saw listed back on the previous slide. So if we go backwards a slide, if we can, you would see that, those things that are listed there that would take $140 million to accomplish would not get done. Now you might see a thing or two at the very bottom, additional security improvements, where we don't have money dedicated to that. We might try to find ways over the time to try to do that over maybe a 2 or 3 year period at $100,000 a year or so. But for the most part, the list here would not be completed. And quite honestly, for a while now, nor would property taxes really be changed, because the current 1508 is paying off current debt that we have. We're just asking to extend the debt and pay the 1508 a little longer. So really, there would be no significant change in anyone's personal outlay in terms of property taxes, because 1508 would still be collected to pay off our existing debt, but we just wouldn't build a high school now. And then over time, I'm sure that we would want to revisit this, but if we revisited this down the road, say 2 years from now or 3 years from now, then the $79.5 million that cost for a high school might be $85 million or $87 million. So, those are the, you ask what would happen if it doesn't pass. Well, those are all results that would take place if this didn't pass.
Thank you. That concludes our questions. I want to remind everyone the election for the school construction bond extension is on August 15th. Early voting starts this Saturday, July 25th, and runs through August 8th. You can early vote at the Donaldsonville and Gonzales courthouses or the Oak Grove Community Center. Superintendent Alexander, panelists, do you have anything you would like to say to close?
Well, I would like to just thank everybody that joined us. Certainly thank anyone who listens to this after it's posted. It is our job, it is our responsibility, it is our duty to make sure that you're properly informed about what we're asking. Our effort here is not one of influence. Instead, it's one of making sure that you have the information you need to make an informed decision about what we're trying to do moving forward. We are all very grateful to be able to be educators and serving an education system in Ascension Parish. It's second to none, that's for sure. And our community has just been an amazing partner to all of its governmental services, all of its public services, from our school system to our local law enforcement to all the things that go on in Ascension Parish, which is what makes it a great community. I want to thank Ms. Graves for her longstanding service in Ascension Parish and all that she does here. And, she's been a long time part of the success here. And for Chad and Jeff for all that they've done with construction in the past, and look forward to giving them an opportunity to move forward and tackle another list should our community want one. And Jackie, I want to thank you for pulling all this together. So that's it. And thank y'all for joining us.
Have a wonderful afternoon. This presentation recording will be on our website, the apsb.org/2020 bond. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Monday.